Hello, my name is Daniel Sweetser, and I am reading from my novel Hope Starts Small. And this morning I'm reading, so it's chapter 7, section 3, OCD. Frank had trouble letting things go. He had inherited this particular tendency like a family heirloom. And it showed up periodically all his life, like when his family was at the beach and he pulled the fire alarm, or when he was in his high school chemistry class and felt compelled to pull the emergency shower. That cost him a week in detention. But it became far more obvious in grad school. The experience was stressful, and he had difficulty keeping up with the reading. There was too much noise going on in his head. And at the same time, he was very interested in no longer being single, and was spending quite a bit of energy trying to sort that out. At some point, for whatever reason, he got the distressing idea that if he did whatever God told him to, God would give him a wife by Christmas, like some sort of deranged Hallmark movie. Now, this was wrong on so many different levels that it's hard to pick even one, but perhaps a translation would help. What this really meant to Frank was that if he did whatever he thought God told him to do in that moment, he was convinced that it would somehow compel the creator of the universe to give him what he wanted. Frank started to act on this. For the most part, when what he thought God was telling him to do was pick up discarded trash whenever he saw it wasn't in a bin. And then he thought God told him to throw out the beautiful guitar he received from his dad. Not cool. This continued for a few weeks, and then Frank went home for Christmas break. It didn't get better there. He kept picking up trash. He visited his pastor and felt compelled to pray an awkward blessing over him. He had to go to the dentist and afterward felt compelled to repeatedly go back in and tell them Jesus loved them. Which was true, of course, but probably not something that the receptionist wanted to hear twice in 10 minutes. It all culminated when Frank, on Christmas Eve, went out in the cold with no coat and picked up cigarette butts in front of a Dollar General while muttering some random prayers in Spanish. It was a dark moment. He returned home, and the next morning he told his mom what he had done the prior night. His mom, kindly and with a characteristic bluntness, said to him, "I don't think that's God." Of course, she was right. That isn't at all how it works. God does what he wants. You can't force him to comply with your demands through some kind of insane compulsive voodoo. And her words helped Frank tremendously. They started to slowly unpeel the nonsense that had collected in his brain over the past few weeks. He ended up dropping out of grad school and working in IT, which he enjoyed more, and he was convinced that it was more pleasing to his father than picking up trash in a parking lot. He started to learn then that he could best serve God by using the gifts he was given to the best of his ability, joyfully, rather than through the forced flagellation to which he had been subjecting himself. Life progressed from there, and Frank never went back to that dark place. But later on, with the help of friends, he began to notice that there was another thorn in his side, as it were. He would regularly see flashes of terrifying images in his mind, violent, gruesome things. They would appear and then disappear just as quickly. They would often come into his mind when he was stressed or overwhelmed. And when they did, they might come repeatedly, like the buffeting waves of the sea during a storm, one after another, with only seconds in between. On the advice of his pastor and another friend, Frank got help. He talked to a doctor and then to a psychiatrist, and in the end he learned that these intrusive thoughts were a common manifestation of OCD. And while these particular horrors he experienced were not things he ever intended to act on, unlike his mental breakdown in grad school, they appeared to have sprouted from the same root as his trash-collecting inclinations. Frank got on medication, and for the most part his brain shut up. He could talk with people and do things without being perpetually interrupted by a horror show. This was a mercy of God. But before Frank went on the meds, he had shared with his doctor a fear he had. He was a hard worker, but a lot of this came from determination to not stop until a thing was figured out. He was afraid that would go away. And then there was the field. He had uprooted his family and moved out of town so he could plant a field of blueberries. This plan had come about rather quickly, and he was certainly driven to do it. But was it all part of the same nonsense? In the end, Frank took the meds, and he did calm down. But thankfully, he found that the parts of him that did well at work by not giving up, and that wanted to go dig up weeds and plant blueberries, stuck around. This meant, of course, that he was just fundamentally a little odd. But he didn't mind that. He would wear that badge with pride. All right, thanks for listening. Have a great day.